husband never let anyone else open our mail. Not the bills, not the bank statements, not even the holiday cards from his mother that came every December in red envelopes with little snowflakes printed on the corners. He had a system, he said. He liked to go through everything himself first. I handle the finances, Elise. You don't need to worry about any of that. And for 4 years, I didn't. That's the part I keep coming back to, not what he did, not even why, but the fact that I let it go on for 4 years without once asking a single real question. I was 31 when I finally opened an envelope that wasn't addressed to me. I want to say I did it on purpose. I want to say I was suspicious, that something in my gut had been whispering to me for months, and I finally listened. But the truth is smaller than that. The truth is that the envelope was sitting on the kitchen counter next to my coffee cup when I woke up that morning, and my husband was already in the shower, and I was half asleep, and I just picked it up. It was from a bank I didn't recognize. Not our joint checking, not the mortgage company, not any of the institutions whose names I'd absorbed over the years by accident. This was different. Greenway Private Wealth Management. The return address was a suite number in downtown Chicago. I put it down. I picked it up again. He was still in the shower. I could hear the water running through the ceiling. I opened it. His name is Grant. Grant Whitfield. We met at a work conference in Minneapolis when I was 26 and he was 34. And he had this way of making you feel like you were the most interesting person in the room. Not in a performative way, in a quiet, attentive way that made you want to tell him everything. I did tell him everything. Within 3 months, I'd told him about my parents' divorce, about the eating disorder I'd had at 19, about the miscarriage I'd had with someone else 2 years before I met him. He was careful with those things. He held them like something fragile. We got married 18 months after we met. Small wedding. Just family and close friends at a venue outside of Evanston with string lights and a catered dinner that cost more than my first car. His parents paid for most of it. They were generous people, or at least they seemed that way. His mother sent those red envelopes every December. His father called on birthdays. We bought a house in Naperville. A real house, 4 bedrooms, a yard, the kind of house that implies a future. Grant worked in corporate finance. I was a speech-language pathologist at a pediatric clinic. Between the two of us, we were comfortable. Not wealthy, but comfortable. That was the word we used. Comfortable. I stopped asking questions because comfortable people don't ask questions. You ask questions when something feels wrong, and nothing ever felt exactly wrong. It just felt managed. He managed everything. The investment accounts, the insurance policies, the retirement contributions, the tax returns. Every April, I would sign where he pointed and he would mail the envelope, and that was that. You have enough to think about, he'd say. Let me carry this part. I let him carry it. Greenway Private Wealth Management. The statement was 4 pages long. Account holder, Grant R. Whitfield. No joint ownership. No mention of my name anywhere on the document. The balance made me sit down, not because it was enormous. It was significant, over $200,000. But that wasn't the part that made my legs go weak. The part that did it was the transaction history. Monthly transfers going back almost 3 years from an account I didn't recognize into this one. Regular, consistent. The same amount every single month, $3,400. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at that number until I heard the shower turn off. I put the statement back in the envelope. I sealed it with a piece of tape from the junk drawer, pressing down the edges with my thumb. I set it back exactly where it had been, next to the coffee maker, slightly angled toward the window. Then I went upstairs and got dressed for work and kissed my husband on the cheek and said I'd be home by 6. I drove 3 blocks and then I pulled over and I sat in my car for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 minutes because I watched the clock. I needed those 11 minutes to understand what I was feeling, and what I was feeling was this. I was not surprised, and that was the thing that frightened me most. I didn't confront him that night, or the next night, or the night after that. What I did instead was start paying attention in a way I hadn't before. I'd spent 4 years letting my husband's life wash over me like background noise, and now I was listening for the melody underneath. He worked late on Tuesdays. He always had for as long as I could remember, and I had always assumed it was genuinely work. Now I started noticing that when he came home on Tuesday nights, he smelled different. Not like another woman. I want to be precise here, but like a different life. Like a house that wasn't ours. Like someone else's laundry detergent in someone else's air. He took calls in the garage sometimes. He said it was because the reception was better out there. I had believed that too. I started writing things down. Not in a journal. I was afraid he'd find it. But in a note on my phone labeled grocery list that I kept buried in a folder. Dates. Times. Small inconsistencies. The way he flinched slightly when his phone buzzed during dinner. The way he always took it off the charger before I was awake in the morning. 3 weeks after I found the statement, I called our insurance company. I told them I was trying to get an overview of all the policies we held jointly and could they help me understand what we had. The woman on the phone was patient and thorough. She listed our home policy, our auto policies, my health insurance through the clinic, his health insurance through his employer, and then she mentioned a life insurance policy that I was listed as the sole beneficiary on. Of course, I said. And is there anything else under my name? There was a pause. Mom, you're listed as a beneficiary on one policy, but there's a second policy under your husband's name with a different beneficiary. I kept my voice completely level. Can you tell me who that beneficiary is? She hesitated. I can only discuss the policyholder's information with the policyholder. I'm sorry. But if you'd like to get a clearer picture of your household coverage, we'd suggest scheduling a full review. I thanked her and hung up. I sat in the parking lot of the Jewel-Osco for 20 minutes this time. A second life insurance policy, a private wealth account, monthly transfers of $3,400 for 3 years. Tuesday nights that smell like someone else's house. I called my sister. Her name is June. She's 4 years older than me, and she's the kind of person who, when you tell her something terrible, doesn't say, "Oh my God," or "Are you serious?" or any of the things that feel like responses but are actually just sounds. She just gets quiet. And then she asks the one question that cuts straight to the center of it. She asked, "Do you think there's another family?" I hadn't let myself use that word, family. But the moment she said it, I knew she was right. $3,400 a month, consistent for 3 years, not a loan payment, not an investment. The way you'd support a person, maybe more than one person. I don't know, I said, but I think I need to find out before I say anything to him. You need a lawyer, she said. I need information first. Elise. She said my name the way she used to when we were teenagers and I was about to do something she considered poorly planned. Get a lawyer before you go digging. Whatever you find, you need someone in your corner before he knows you're looking. I made an appointment the next morning. Her name was Catherine Solis. Family law, 15 years, office in Oak Park. She had a framed print on the wall that said, "Steady," in lowercase letters, and I found that either very calming or very ominous, depending on which moment I was in. She listened to everything. The bank statement, the insurance call, the Tuesday nights. She didn't react dramatically to any of it. She just wrote things down in a yellow legal pad and occasionally asked a clarifying question. When I was done, she said, "You're right to come here before confronting him. What you've described suggests possible financial concealment, which in Illinois is relevant to asset division in divorce proceedings. I'd like you to get copies of your last 3 years of joint tax returns. Do you have access to those?" I did. Grant kept our important documents in a fire safe in the home office closet. I knew the combination, our anniversary, which I now found almost unbearably ironic, but I had never had cause to open it myself. She also told me to contact the Social Security Administration and request an earnings history statement for both of us. It's a public record, she said. You can request your spouse's too. And she told me, gently but directly, that if I found what she suspected I might find, I should not tip him off. Not yet. Not until we had a clearer picture. The worst thing you can do right now, she said, is let him know you're looking. I drove home and I made dinner and I watched television with my husband and I laughed at a joke he made about the neighbor's dog and I went to sleep next to him and I stared at the ceiling for 2 hours before I finally went under. The fire safe had 3 years of tax returns as I expected. It also had something I did not expect, a folder, manila, unlabeled, tucked beneath the returns. Inside the folder were 2 things. The first was a lease agreement, a rental property in Wicker Park, an apartment, 2 bedrooms, signed in my husband's name. The lease had been renewed twice. The current monthly rent was $2,200. The second thing was a photograph, a woman, younger than me, maybe late 20s, dark hair, sitting on what appeared to be the same couch I'd seen in an IKEA catalog once and thought about buying. Next to her, a little boy, maybe 2 years old. He had my husband's nose. He had my husband's jaw. He had the exact set of my husband's ears, the slightly rounded tips that I had always found inexplicably dear. I stood in the closet of the home office for a long time. I didn't cry. I want to be honest about that. I thought I would. I'd always imagined that if I ever discovered something like this, I would collapse, crumple, fall apart in the way that people do in movies. But what I actually felt was a strange, cold clarity. Like someone had finally turned on a light in a room I'd been fumbling around in for years, and the light was terrible, but at least now I could see. I took photos of every document with my phone. I put the folder back exactly as I'd found it. I closed the safe. I went downstairs and I put a chicken in the oven for dinner because it was Tuesday and Grant would be home late. I gave everything to Catherine the next day. The lease, the photograph, the names. I'd found the woman's name on the lease, listed as an additional resident, Brooke Carmichael. The little boy's name I found when I finally did what I should have done weeks earlier and searched my husband's email from his laptop while he was out for a run on Saturday morning. His name was Owen. He was 26 months old. His birthday was in August, which meant he'd been conceived roughly 11 months into our marriage. There was an entire separate email life in that inbox. A folder labeled BC Brooke Carmichael with 4 years of correspondence. The early ones were different, more guarded, more transactional. But somewhere around 18 months in the tone shifted. I love you appeared for the first time in a message about whether to paint the nursery yellow or grey. He had chosen yellow. Catherine moved quickly after that. She filed for a formal disclosure of assets, which under Illinois law requires both parties to provide a full accounting of all financial holdings. She also connected me with a forensic accountant who began tracing the money. The $3,400 per month came from an account Grant had opened before we were married and never disclosed. There was also a second account, smaller, that had been used for things I could only describe as household expenses. A pediatrician in Wicker Park, a daycare center in Bucktown, birthday gifts charged to a store I'd never heard of in a neighborhood I'd never visited. He had built an entire parallel life. Not a casual affair, not a lapse in judgment, a deliberate, sustained, financially structured second family. He had done the math. He had made the transfers. He had kept the folder in the fire safe where he was the one who always opened it, next to the documents of the life he shared with me. I told him on a Thursday night. Catherine had advised against confronting him at all before the legal process was further along, and she was right to advise that. But I couldn't do it anymore. 3 weeks of making dinner and watching television and sleeping next to him, knowing what I knew, had cost me something I couldn't name but could feel. I was hollowing out from the inside. I waited until he was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and his laptop, doing whatever it was he did on Thursday evenings that I had never once questioned. I sat down across from him. I put my phone on the table, face up, with the photograph of the lease on the screen. He looked at it. He looked at me. To his credit, and I use that phrase loosely, he didn't try to explain it away. He didn't tell me it wasn't what it looked like. He just set down his wine glass very carefully, the way he set down fragile things, and he said, "How long have you known?" "Long enough," I said. He tried, after that. He tried the way people try when they've been caught completely and they have no remaining strategy except honesty. He told me about Brooke. He told me she'd been a colleague originally. He told me it hadn't been planned. He told me that by the time she told him she was pregnant, he didn't know how to tell me. And then more time passed and it became even harder to tell me. And then Owen was born and he was real and present, and the impossibility of telling me had calcified into something that just became the shape of his life. "You chose this," I said. "Every month for 3 years, every transfer, every Tuesday night. You chose it." He didn't argue with that. I asked him one question. I'd thought about what I wanted to ask him for weeks, and I'd landed on this one. "Did you ever plan to tell me? At any point? Was there ever a version of this where you told me?" He was quiet for a long time. "No," he said finally. "I don't think there was." I nodded. I picked up my phone. I went upstairs and I called June and I told her it was done, and she said, "I'm coming over." And I said, "Okay." The divorce took 14 months. The financial concealment complicated things significantly, but in a way that ultimately worked in my favor. Illinois is an equitable distribution state, which means marital assets are divided fairly, not necessarily equally based on a range of factors. Catherine argued successfully that Grant's deliberate concealment of assets over the course of our marriage constituted a form of financial misconduct that warranted a larger share for me. I received the house. I received a significant portion of the disclosed investment accounts. I received a settlement that the forensic accountant calculated as roughly equivalent to what I would have been entitled to had all assets been disclosed from the beginning. Grant moved into the Wicker Park apartment. I assume he's still there. Brooke. I've thought about her a lot, probably more than is healthy. She called me once, about 2 months after I filed. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice was quieter than I'd expected. She said she hadn't known about me at first. She said that by the time she did know, she was already pregnant, and she was in love. And she told herself a lot of things that she now understood were things she'd told herself because she needed to. She said she was sorry. I've listened to that voicemail maybe a dozen times. I still haven't called her back. I don't know if I ever will. But I've stopped thinking of her as the villain of this story. The villain of this story knew exactly what he was doing and chose to keep doing it year after year with the kind of steadiness most people only apply to things they genuinely love. He was steady. I'll give him that, just not with me. There's a thing that happens when a marriage ends that no one really prepares you for. It's not the grief, though there's plenty of that. It's the inventory. You go back through everything, every decision, every moment you let something go, every question you didn't ask, and you try to figure out which parts were your fault and which parts were just what happens when you trust someone completely, and they decide that trust is a resource to be managed rather than a responsibility to be honored. I spent a long time in that inventory. Longer than I probably needed to. What I came out with was this: I was not foolish for trusting him. Trusting a spouse is not naivety. It is the basic operating assumption of a marriage, and he knew that, and he used it. And that is not something I did wrong. What I did wrong, the one thing I would genuinely take back, was this. I let comfortable become a reason not to be curious. I let ease become a substitute for engagement. I handed over the financial part of our life not because I was incapable of understanding it, but because it was easier to let him carry it, and I mistook ease for trust. Those are not the same thing. I know that now. The house sold 8 months after the divorce was finalized. I didn't want to keep it. Too many rooms that had been lived in under false pretenses, too many corners where comfort had disguised itself as something more durable. I found an apartment in Lincoln Square. Third floor, exposed brick. A window in the kitchen that looks out onto an elm tree. That is, in October, almost unbearably beautiful. I bought my own furniture. I set up my own accounts. I sat down with a financial advisor, a woman named Patricia who has a framed print of Lake Michigan in her office and charges by the hour. And I learned, at 32, how my own money works. It was humbling. It was also one of the better decisions I have ever made. June came over the weekend I moved in, and we stayed up until 2 in the morning eating Thai food on the floor because I didn't have a table yet. And she told me something I keep coming back to. She said, the version of you that was married to him was a smaller version. I could see it, and I didn't know how to tell you. I knew what she meant. I'd felt smaller. I'd attributed it to growing up, to the natural contraction that comes with building a life that has edges and responsibilities. I didn't realize that the smallness was specific, that it was the shape of the space he'd left for me while he kept everything else for himself. I'm not small anymore. That's the thing about losing a life you thought you had. Sometimes what you find underneath is something larger than what was covering it. I still have the voicemail from Brooke. I don't know why I haven't deleted it. Maybe because it's the one piece of the whole story that still feels unresolved, the one thread that doesn't have an ending yet. Maybe one day I'll call her back. Maybe we'll sit across from each other somewhere, two women who were lied to by the same man in different but parallel ways, and we'll say the things that are hard to say, and we'll figure out what, if anything, is owed between us. Or maybe not. Maybe some threads just stay loose. I've learned to live with loose threads. It turns out that's not the same as unraveling. I used to think that trust and ease were the same thing, that if something felt smooth, it was safe, that if a person carried the weight without complaining, they were carrying it for you. Grant was good at carrying things. He was good at making it feel like generosity, like he was sparing me something, when really he was just keeping me out. There's a version of control that doesn't look like control at all. It looks like taking care. It looks like a husband who says, let me handle it, and means it so consistently for so long that you stop noticing you've handed over the whole map. I was not a passive person in other areas of my life. I advocated for my patients. I pushed back at work. I had opinions and I voiced them. But inside my marriage, I let myself become someone who signed where she was told and didn't ask why. I told myself that was what partnership looked like. Dividing labor, trusting the person you chose. What I understand now is that trust without engagement is not really trust. It's just absence dressed up as faith. Real trust isn't blind. Real trust is something you build with your eyes open, something you check on and return to, something that holds up when you look directly at it. Grant's didn't hold up, but I wasn't looking. The thing about cause and consequence, the real unglamorous version of it, is that it's rarely dramatic in the moment. It's quiet. It's 100 small choices that accumulate into a life you didn't design. Grant made his choices to lie, to conceal, to maintain 2 households and 2 women and one carefully managed surface of normalcy. Those choices had a weight, and eventually that weight broke through the floor. But I made choices too, to stop being curious, to let comfort be enough. To mistake a man handling things for a man being honest. My choices didn't cause what he did, but they created the conditions in which what he did could go undetected for years. That matters. Not as self-blame. I've done enough of that and it isn't useful, but as something worth understanding clearly. What pulled me through wasn't anger, though there was anger. It was something quieter. It was June sitting on my kitchen floor telling me I'd been a smaller version of myself. It was Catherine writing steadily on her yellow legal pad without flinching. It was me, sitting across from a financial advisor for the first time at 32, learning how compound interest works, feeling humiliated, and then feeling, slowly, capable. Capability is underrated as a form of healing. Not therapy speak capability, just the plain practical kind. The kind where you understand your own accounts and make your own decisions and know exactly what you have and what it means. I'm not the same person I was when I was married to Grant. I'm louder in the places I used to go quiet. I ask questions now, even when asking feels uncomfortable. I don't let ease substitute for understanding. That's what this cost me, and that's what it gave me back. I think that's a fair trade. I didn't choose the cost, but I'll take what I got for it.